The night sky over Earth looked calm, but deep in the black silence of space, something strange had begun. A signal, not of human origin, traveled through the void. It was sharp, broken, and filled with fear. Machines on Earth's orbital listening posts caught the sound first. Computers tried to make sense of it, but no program could fully decode it. It was not a normal distress call. It was older, stranger, and one phrase repeated again and again, hidden inside the static. Deathworlders. Answer. The word spread, fast through Space Command. Officers gathered in control rooms, their faces pale, their voices low. They had studied alien languages for years, but this one phrase was clear. Whoever sent the message, they knew about humans. They were not calling humans or Earthlings. They were calling Deathworlders. The word carried heavy weight. In the wider galaxy, humans were feared for surviving a planet full of storms, beasts, and endless dangers. Many alien scholars whispered that Earth itself was a nightmare world. If such creatures had evolved there, then they must be stronger, tougher, and far more dangerous than any other species. But now, someone out there was not just afraid of Deathworlders. Someone out there was begging for them. Across the oceans and cities of Earth, leaders argued. Should they answer? Should they ignore it? The last time humans joined alien wars, the cost had been high. Too many lives had been lost. Too many ships had never returned. The fleet was sleeping, hidden in dockyards left to rust in silence. Humanity had promised itself never to awaken those weapons again. Yet the signal repeated. Over and over, every hour, stronger. It was not random, it was directed. The sender was waiting, watching, and the tone was not just desperate, it was urgent, as if time was running out. Commander Rourke stood in the control chamber of Lunar Command, base, staring at the projection of the signal. His hands were tight behind his back, his jaw locked. He was an old soldier, one of the few still alive who had fought in the first alien wars. He knew the look of fear in his officers' eyes. They wanted answers, and he had none. The signal is old, the science officer whispered. The energy pattern, it is not human technology, not any we know. But the voice, if you listen closely, it is filled with terror. Terror? Rourke asked. Yes, sir. Whoever sent this was not just calling for help. They were warning us. Rourke leaned closer, the broken static echoing in his ears. He had heard death cries on battlefields before. He had heard soldiers call for their mothers in their final breath. This sound was the same, but it was not one voice. It was millions, layered together, screaming across the stars. In the cities below, normal people had no idea. Children played, in the streets, unaware that the galaxy was whispering Earth's name. Politicians, locked in secret meetings, debated if they should reveal the truth. Panic would spread if the public knew. Already rumors were leaking through underground networks. Hackers had caught fragments of the message, forums filled with one burning question. Why would anyone call the Deathworlders? Some believed it was a trap. Others thought it was proof that humanity's reputation had grown larger than ever. If even advanced alien races begged for them, maybe humans had finally become legends. But legends came at a price, and nobody wanted to pay it again. The signal grew louder with each passing day. By the seventh night, it was no longer faint. It thundered across every listening post, bouncing through satellites, shaking the walls of every command center. The HFY message carried an edge now, almost like claws scratching metal. Deathworlders, you are needed. If you do not come, we all burn. No one could ignore it anymore. Commander Rourke gathered his highest officers in the war room. Maps of the galaxy lit the walls. Lines of stars stretched into infinity. Somewhere far beyond the edges of human colonies, the call was coming from. Who sent it? Rourke asked again. No one knows, replied the science officer. But the energy source is massive. It's broadcasting from a collapsed system, a place where suns have died. No species should be living there, not anymore. And yet, Rourke said, someone is. Silence fell. Each officer knew what was unspoken. If they followed the call, they would awaken the fleet. They would drag Earth into war again. But if they ignored it, the galaxy might pay a cost too heavy to imagine. Later that night, Rourke stood alone on the edge of the observation deck. Through the glass, Earth shone blue and fragile, a jewel in the dark. He thought of the word Deathworlder, a curse, a warning, a promise. Humans never chose that title. The galaxy gave it to them because no other species could survive what they did. But survival came with responsibility. If others were dying, if entire civilizations were crying out, then perhaps there was no choice. Perhaps the name Deathworlder was not just a curse. Perhaps it was a destiny. The signal echoed, one last time in the chamber, cold and merciless. Deathworlders, answer, before the dark comes. Rourke closed his eyes. He knew the decision was already made. The fleet would not sleep much longer. The Deathworlder name. The galaxy was vast, full of countless suns, planets, and civilizations. Many species had risen to power. Some were wise, some were cruel, some were weak. But there was one word, spoken with fear across all the stars. One word carried like a shadow through alien histories, Deathworlder. It was not just a name, it was a warning. Long before the signal reached Earth, the galaxy already knew of humans. Their planet, Earth, was labeled a Class 5 Deathworld, RE, world where survival was nearly impossible. The records of alien scholars described it in horror. Violent storms that could tear cities apart, oceans filled with predators, jungles crawling with venom and teeth, mountains that shook with fire, from the planet's own heart. To most aliens, such a world was a nightmare unfit for life. Yet against all odds, humans thrived there. They did not just survive storms, they sailed them. They did not just fear predators, they hunted them. Where other races built shelters, humans built empires. Where others ran from danger, humans marched into it. That was why the galaxy whispered, Deathworlders. On the alien trade stations, stories spread about humans. They heal faster than they should, one merchant whispered. They fight even when they are broken, another said. They are unpredictable, like fire. To many peaceful species, humans were too dangerous. To warriors, they were too reckless. But all agreed, Deathworlders were different. And now, for the first time in centuries, someone had spoken the name with purpose. The signal called not to humans, but to Deathworlders. Whoever sent it knew exactly what they were asking for. Inside the secret chambers of the United Terran Assembly, leaders argued. Some wanted to ignore the call. If we answer, we step back into wars that are not ours, said one senator. We already paid our blood in the last galactic conflict. Millions of our soldiers never came home. Others leaned forward, eyes sharp with cold logic. And if we ignore it, the sender spoke of fire, of burning. If this threat spreads, it will not stop at alien borders. It will reach us. Back on the lunar command base, Commander Rourke listened quietly to these reports. He knew the truth. The word Deathworlder was not given as an insult. It was given as recognition. The galaxy had tested humans before, and the humans had endured. He remembered his first mission beyond Earth decades ago. Their ship had docked with an alien convoy under attack by raiders. The aliens had begged for surrender. They had offered tribute. But the humans had drawn blades, fired rifles, and fought until the last raider ship burned. That day, the aliens called them mad, but they also called them something else, necessary. Necessary in times when survival itself was the only victory. Meanwhile, across alien worlds, panic was spreading. On a diplomatic channel, a voice crackled from a reptilian envoy. If the Deathworlders have been summoned, then the enemy must be beyond imagination. On another station, scholars argued late into the night. Do you not see? This is history repeating. Every time the humans are awakened, something terrible comes. The universe shakes when the Deathworlders march. But there was no agreement, only fear. Far away, in the hidden shipyards of Mars, old machines were stirring. Ships that had not seen starlight in years hummed as power returned to their cores. Engineers worked in silence, their hands trembling. They knew what it meant to restart these giants of steel. They were not just weapons. They were promises of violence forged for survival, Some of the younger workers whispered to each other, "Why do they call us Deathworlders?" The older veterans answered with tired eyes, "Because the galaxy knows what we are. We do not break, we do not quit. When others fall, humans keep fighting." The signal still played in the background, louder every day. "Deathworlders, answer." Rourke finally stood before his officers again. His voice was steady, though his heart carried the weight of old battles. "The galaxy gave us a name," he said. "They feared us for it. They hated us for it. But now, they beg for it. They are not asking for peacekeepers. They are not asking for diplomats. They are asking for Deathworlders. They are asking for us." The room went silent. Rourke looked at each officer one by one. Some were young, barely old enough to have seen war. Others were veterans, scarred and weary. But all of them understood. The name was heavy, but it was theirs. Out beyond human space, in the black between stars, the threat was growing. No one yet knew its face, no one yet saw its shape. But whatever it was strong enough to break entire civilizations. It was strong enough to make the proudest alien races whisper the word Deathworlder with trembling lips. The galaxy needed monsters of its own to fight monsters in the dark, and so the humans accepted the name. Not as shame, not as curse, but as their role. If the galaxy burned, then the Deathworlders would rise. Commander Rourke turned back to the map of the stars. His voice was low, but every officer in the room heard it. "Wake the fleet." The word Deathworlder no longer hung as a warning. It had become a promise. The awakening fleet deep beneath the red soil of Mars. The silence was broken. Once the shipyards had been alive with voices, engines, and sparks of fire. Then came the long sleep. The ships of Earth's war fleet were hidden, sealed away under orders never to wake again. They became shadows of a forgotten age. Silent, giants covered in dust. But now, for the first time in decades, their hearts began to beat again. A low hum shook through the underground hangars as power returned to old reactors. Lights flickered to life across steel corridors. Ancient computers blinked awake, projecting codes that had not been read for a generation. Massive hangar doors, sealed by layers of Martian rock, cracked and shuddered as locks disengaged. Deathworlder fleet was stirring. Engineers and soldiers stood at attention, watching as the first ships powered up. Their faces were pale, their eyes wide. Some of them were too young to remember the wars of old, but they had heard the stories. Stories of thunder in the void. Stories of fleets that fought even when broken. Of ships that never retreated until the enemy was ash. Now those legends were becoming real again. Commander Rourke walked the central dock, his boots echoing against the steel floor. He stopped before the first awakening vessel, a massive destroyer called Iron Resolve. Its hull was scarred with the burns of past battles, but its spirit had never been broken. Crews swarmed over it, restoring life to every system. Rourke placed a hand on the cold metal and spoke softly, almost like speaking to an old friend. "You've slept long enough. Time to wake." The ship's lights flickered, then burned steady. The engines rumbled like a beast rising from its cave. Across the galaxy, alien eyes turned toward the Deathworlder shipyards. Surveillance probes caught glimpses of ships leaving their hidden graves. On alien councils, leaders whispered in fear. "The humans are moving again. The Deathworlder fleet, it is real." For years, some had doubted. Some believed the tales of human war machines were only myths. Now the truth was undeniable. The fleet was not built like other fleets. Alien ships were sleek, elegant, designed for speed and grace. But Deathworlder ships were different. They were built heavy, armored like mountains, forged for survival above all else. Where alien ships danced, human ships endured. Where others broke, humans held the line. The aliens had always called them ugly, but in the darkness of war, there was a beauty in their brutality. In the control rooms of Mars, officers reviewed the fleet's condition. "How many are combat ready?" Rourke asked. 17 capital ships, 35 destroyers, and 100 smaller escorts, the officer replied. "More are in reserve, but they will need time to repair." 17 will be enough, Rourke said. His eyes were hard. "It has to be. The signal was still echoing through the stars. Louder now. More urgent. Whoever was calling them, the danger was growing closer. On Earth, people finally learned the truth. News broadcasts showed the awakening fleet. Families gathered around. Screens, some with pride, some with fear. Mothers cried at the thought of their children marching into the stars. Veterans saluted the sight of their old ships returning to life. Children pointed with shining eyes, dreaming of heroes. The galaxy had called for Deathworlders, and Deathworlders were answering. Rourke knew this fleet was not just metal and fire. It was human will made into steel. Each ship carried the memory of sacrifice. Each engine roared with the voices of those who had never returned. To awaken them was to awaken history itself. As the first ships left orbit, the stars trembled with their passage. Engines thundered, trails of burning light cutting across the void. Alien traders fled the lanes, making way for the Deathworlders. They had heard the stories. They knew better than to block the path of a fleet that never turned back. From a distant station, an alien observer sent a final report. They have risen. The Deathworlders have risen. Rourke stood on the command deck of his flagship, Titan's Wrath. The ship was colossal, a fortress in space. He gazed at the stars ahead, his voice steady as he gave the order. Set course for the source of the signal. The officers obeyed, their hands firm on the controls. The fleet shifted, aligning toward the unknown. In the silence of space, the Deathworlder fleet thundered to life. Their reputation had already spread before them. Stories would grow stronger now, as every alien eye turned to watch. Some prayed the humans would succeed. Others prayed they would fail. But all agreed. Whatever was coming, the galaxy would never be the same again. The fleet was awake, and it was moving. The enemy revealed. The Deathworlder fleet moved across the stars, their engines burning like thunder in the void. For days, the ships followed the signal, tracing it deeper and deeper into uncharted space. Each hour, the call grew sharper. The words were always the same. Deathworlders, you are needed. But behind the words was something else. A faint echo, almost like screaming, buried in static. Commander Rourke stood on the bridge of Titans. Wrath, staring at the galactic map. The fleet was moving into a dead system. The stars here were dim, their light old and tired. Planets had crumbled to ash long ago. It was a graveyard, silent and cold. "This is where the signal comes from?" Rourke asked. "Yes, sir," replied the science officer. "But we're picking up something else. Fragments of debris, heat traces, wreckage." The fleet slowed as they entered the system. Screens lit up with images of broken ships. Not just human designs, these were alien vessels, dozens of them shattered and burned. Whole fleets had died here, and every wreck carried the same scars. Deep, perfect holes drilled straight through hulls, as if something had eaten its way inside. The crew stared in silence. Rourke felt the weight pressing down on them all. This was not just war, this was slaughter. Then came the sound, a low hum, faint at first but growing louder across the comms. The same static as the signal, but twisted now. Behind the words, something was breathing. "Deathworlders, come." Suddenly, alarms screamed across the flagship. The scanners lit red. "Contacts," the tactical officer shouted. Multiple contacts emerging from the dark side of the system. On the main screen, shapes appeared, hundreds of them, crawling out from behind the broken remains of the dead fleets. They were not ships in the normal sense. They looked alive. Jagged, bodies of black metal twisted in unnatural ways, their surfaces shifting like liquid. Eyes, if they could be called eyes, glowed faint red along their frames. They moved with eerie precision, swarming together like a school of predators. The bridge fell into silence. The crew was staring at monsters. The science officer's voice was shaking. They're not alive, but they're not machines either. Something in between. Adaptive. They consume metal, energy, even life itself. "What are they called?" Rourke asked. "There's no record, sir, but some alien transmissions call them The Hollow. The Hollow. Creatures born not of flesh or circuit but both. They did not build, they consumed. They did not conquer, they erased. The alien fleets that had sent the call must have been the last defenders. They had fought here, and they had lost. Now the Hollow turned their glowing eyes on the Deathworlder fleet. The bridge shook as the first swarm launched forward, moving faster than missiles. Their bodies cut through the void like blades. "Battle stations," Rourke roared. "All ships, hold formation." The fleet came alive. Cannons charged, missiles armed, shields lit up like fire. The first clash was brutal. Hollow swarms slammed into human ships, tearing at armor with razor limbs. The humans fought back with raw fury. Railguns tore through black metal. Explosions lit the void, and shattered fragments of Hollow drifted away. But the swarm did not stop. For every creature destroyed, 10 more appeared. On the comms, officers shouted reports. Iron Resolve taking heavy damage. Shields failing on Spear of Dawn. "We've never seen anything like this, sir." But still, the humans fought. Aliens, watching from distant stations, saw the battle unfold. For the first time in centuries, the Deathworlder fleet fought again. Other species would have broken, other fleets would have run. But not humans. They held the line. Even as ships burned, even as the Hollow swarmed like a tide, the Deathworlders fought back with rage born of survival. "This," one alien observer whispered, "is why they are called Deathworlders. They do not surrender." As the battle raged, Rourke studied the Hollow's movements. They were strong, yes. Fast, yes. But they were predictable. They attacked like predators with no fear. They never retreated. They never adapted to tactics. That was their weakness. "Tell the fleet to concentrate fire on one swarm at a time," Rourke ordered. "Do not spread fire. Burn them down, one cluster at a time." The humans obeyed. Slowly, the tide shifted. Hollow bodies shattered in bursts of light. The swarm faltered. For the first time, the Hollow were pushed back. When the last of the first wave broke apart, silence filled the bridge. The crew was bloodied, but alive. Ships burned, but the line had held. Rourke stared at the drifting wreckage. His voice was low. "Now we know what sent the call. Not just desperation, not just fear. These things, they will not stop. They will spread, system by system, until nothing remains. And the galaxy knows only one species mad enough to fight them." He turned to his officers. His eyes were cold steel. They called the Deathworlders, and the Deathworlders have answered. The first battle, the void was silent again. Wreckage of the Hollow drifted like black ash around the Deathworlder fleet. Fires burned on damaged ships. Sparks flickered through broken hulls. But the humans still stood. They had survived the first strike. Commander Rourke stood tall on the bridge of Titan's Wrath. His officers were exhausted, sweat dripping down. Their faces, uniforms scorched from overloaded circuits. But no one rested. They all knew this was only the beginning. "The swarm pulled back," one officer reported. "But they're not gone. They're regrouping." Rourke's jaw tightened. The Hollow did not retreat to survive. They retreated to gather strength. That meant the next wave would be worse. Across the fleet, repair crews worked like lightning. Sparks flew as engineers welded torn hulls. Medics rushed through corridors, patching wounds, calming soldiers. Even the injured tried to stand, refusing to leave their posts. Deathworlders had no time for weakness. If the fleet fell, the galaxy would fall with them. Then the scanners screamed. "Contacts," the tactical officer shouted. Massive formation incoming, larger than before. Hundreds, maybe thousands. The bridge froze. The screen filled with red. The Hollow were returning, and this time they were a storm. Their shapes poured out of the shadows of the system. Razor spines, shifting metal, eyes glowing red like burning coals. The sight chilled even hardened veterans. Rourke's voice cut through the silence. "Hold the line." The swarm struck. The Hollow crashed against the Deathworlder fleet like a tidal wave. Their bodies smashed into shields, drilling, into hulls. They latched onto human ships, claws tearing metal like paper. Their screams echoed through comms. A sound that was neither mechanical nor alive, something in between. The humans fought back with fury. Cannons roared. tearing holes through the swarm. Railguns punched through black armor, splitting creatures apart. Missiles streaked across the void, exploding into waves of fire. The battlefield became a storm of light and shadow, death and defiance. On the destroyer Iron Resolve, Captain Leona Vargas stood unshaken as hollow creatures ripped into her hull. Her ship was bleeding fire, but she refused to yield. "Drive us into them," she ordered. Her crew obeyed, engines roaring. The Iron Resolve smashed straight into the swarm, its railguns blazing, its hull battering hollow apart. The ship became a weapon itself, a beast of iron charging into monsters. The aliens watching from distant relays gasped in disbelief. "No species would do this," one whispered. "No species but Deathworlders." On the flagship, the bridge shook under impact. Hollow slammed into Titan's Wrath, trying to pierce its armor. Sparks burst from consoles, officers fell to the floor, but they rose again, fighting on. "Sir, they're inside the lower decks," a Marine officer shouted. Rourke's eyes narrowed. "Seal the bulkheads, vent them into space." The Marines obeyed, locking down sections of the ship. Hollow swarms tore through corridors, shrieking until doors slammed shut and airlocks opened. The creatures were dragged screaming into the void. The crew cheered. One more wave held back. But the Hollow kept coming. They swarmed over smaller escorts, tearing them apart. One frigate exploded in a flash of fire, another broke in half, spilling crew into space. The losses mounted, and still, the humans fought. Rourke gripped the command rail, his voice steady as iron. "Focus fire, one swarm at a time. Do not break." "Formation." The order spread through the fleet. Deathworlder ships moved as one, guns turning in unison. Whole swarms of Hollow were cut down in concentrated fire, exploding into clouds of black shards. The humans had found the enemy's weakness, not brute force, not speed, but coordination, discipline, and sheer willpower. Hours passed, the battle raging without pause. The fleet bled, but it refused to fall. Alien observers could only watch in silence. For centuries, they had feared the word Deathworlder. They had whispered it as a curse, a warning. But now, as they watched humans fight with fire in their hearts, they realized the truth. The galaxy had no other species like them. When Deathworlders fought, they did not fight to survive. They fought to win. Finally, the tide began to break. The Hollow swarm faltered under the endless storm of human fire. One by one, their bodies shattered into fragments. The survivors pulled back, vanishing into the dark edges of the system. The battle was over. The Deathworlder fleet drifted among the wreckage, scarred but alive. Flames still burned on many ships. Hulls were torn. Crews were broken, but the line had held. On the bridge of Titan's Wrath, the officers sat in silence. Their faces were pale, their eyes hollow with exhaustion. But slowly, one by one, they straightened. They had done what no one else could. Rourke's voice was quiet, but every word struck like thunder. "We have faced the enemy, and we did not fall. Remember this, the Hollow can be fought, they can bleed, and we are the ones to make them bleed." The crew let out a ragged cheer. Across the fleet, battered voices joined in. They were bloodied, but unbroken. The galaxy had called. The Deathworlders had answered. The sacrifice. The battlefield was silent, but only for a breath. The Deathworlder fleet floated in the wreckage of the Hollow, scarred and burning. For a moment, it seemed as if they had won. Crews patched hulls, medics carried the wounded, officers whispered relief. But deep in the black, the enemy was waiting, and the Hollow never rested. Scanners lit up again. This time the readings were different. Not hundreds, not thousands, but one. One massive shape moved in the dark. The officers froze as the image formed on the main screen. It was a Hollow unlike anything they had seen. A ship, if it could be called a ship, larger than any Deathworlder dreadnought. Its body was alive with shifting metal, a mountain of black steel crawling with red veins of light. It pulsed as if it had a beating heart, The crew whispered in horror. "It's not a ship," someone said. "It's a hive." The hive surged forward. Every movement shook the void. And as it came, smaller swarms poured from its body, thousands upon thousands spilling into space like fire. Commander Rourke's voice cut sharp across the bridge. "All ships, defensive formation. Do not let them through." The fleet obeyed. Lines of steel shifted into a wall. Shields flared. Cannons, roared missiles streaked into the dark. But the hive was not like the others. Weapons burned against its hide and vanished. Smaller swarms struck like knives, cutting ships apart. One by one, the Deathworlder vessels fell. On the destroyer Iron Resolve, Captain Leona Vargas stood at her post, blood running down her temple from shrapnel. Her ship was broken, fires tearing through the decks, but her eyes burned with defiance. "Bring us closer," she ordered. Her crew looked at her in shock. "Captain, the hive is too strong." "Closer," she roared. "We cannot kill it from here." The Iron Resolve turned, its battered engines screaming. It drove into the swarm, tearing a path through hollow bodies. Every gun fired, every missile launched. The ship bled, but it did not stop. On the flagship, Rourke watched in silence. He knew what Vargas intended. His chest tightened, but he did not call her back. Deathworlders did not retreat when there was no other choice. They sacrificed. Her voice came over the comms, calm and steady. "Commander, it has to be done. You know it." Rourke's hand clenched the rail. "You'll never make it back. I know." A faint smile touched her voice. "But we will make sure the others do." The Iron Resolve broke through the swarm, its hull shredded, decks torn apart. It drove straight at the hive. Hollow claws dug into its sides, but Vargas did not stop. Her crew fought hand to hand as the creatures swarmed inside, rifles blazing, blades flashing, alarms blared, fires spread. The ship was dying. Vargas stood tall on the bridge, her eyes locked on the pulsing core of the hive. Her voice was steady as she gave her final order. "Overload the reactor. All power to the engines, full speed." Her officers hesitated only a second, then obeyed. Every system surged. The destroyer became a burning comet, fire trailing in its wake. The comms filled with her last words. "Deathworlders, never run. Tell them." We stood. Then the Iron Resolve struck. The explosion tore through the void. Light brighter than a sun erupted as the destroyer's core went critical. The hive shuddered, its armor splitting, its body cracking. Shockwaves ripped through the swarm, scattering hollow bodies into fragments. For a moment, silence returned. The hive was wounded. On the Titan's wrath, the crew stared in awe and sorrow. The Iron Resolve was gone, but it had bought them a chance. Rourke's voice was low but filled with steel. "Her sacrifice will not be in vain. Focus fire on the E. Wound! Bring it down!" The fleet roared back to life. Cannons targeted the hive's broken side. Railguns punched through its cracked armor. Missiles exploded into its bleeding core. The hive convulsed, its body tearing apart under the combined fury of the Deathworlders. Finally, with one last shudder, the hive broke. Its massive frame split, collapsing into a storm of molten fragments. The swarm scattered, fleeing into the dark. The battle was over. The Deathworlder fleet floated among the wreckage. Victory was theirs, but the cost was carved into their hearts. Ships burned. Crews wept. And the Iron Resolve was gone, its name etched forever into history. Rourke stood silent on the bridge. His eyes were hard, but his voice was heavy with respect. "Mark this day. Remember her name. Vargas and her crew gave the galaxy hope. Their sacrifice will live as long as the stars." Across the fleet, battered survivors bowed their heads. Even the aliens watching from distant stations felt it. For the first time, they understood that Deathworlders were not just dangerous. They were loyal. They were willing to give everything, even their lives, to hold the line. The signal that had once begged for help had now been answered with blood. Humanity had awakened, and the galaxy would never forget it. But even as the wreckage drifted, even as the survivors mourned, Rourke knew the truth. This was not the end. The Hollow would return. and the cost would only grow. The fleet had won a battle, but the war had just begun. The final message. The void was quiet at last. The hive was gone, shattered into drifting fragments. The hollow swarm had scattered into the black. For the first time since the signal reached Earth, the Deathworlder fleet stood in silence, scarred but victorious. Yet victory tasted like ash. The iron resolve was gone, her crew lost in fire and sacrifice. Other ships were crippled, their decks broken, their survivors clinging to life. Medics worked without rest, pulling the wounded from smoke-filled corridors. Engineers patched ruptured hulls with trembling hands. Across the fleet, humans mourned. But they did not mourn in despair. They mourned with pride, because Vargas and her crew had proven something the galaxy had forgotten. Deathworlders did not just fight to survive. They fought so others could live. On the flagship Titan's Wrath, Commander Rourke stood in the command chamber. His uniform was torn, his face lined with exhaustion, but his eyes were steady. Around him, the officers waited. The room was filled with grief, but also with fire. Rourke looked at the map of the stars. Somewhere out there, the Hollow were retreating, but they would return. He knew it. Everyone knew it. And when they returned, the galaxy had to be ready. Open. The comms? Rourke said. The communications officer turned, uncertain. Sir, to who? Rourke's voice was cold steel. To everyone. Moments later, every channel across the sector carried the Deathworlder signal. It reached alien stations, outposts, colonies. It reached species who had once feared humans, and others who still whispered their name like a curse. Across the galaxy, countless beings turned to listen. Rourke's voice filled the stars. This is Commander Rourke of the United Terran Fleet. You called us. You begged for Deathworlders, and we have answered. The room was silent except for his voice. We faced your enemy. We faced the Hollow. They can be fought, they can bleed, but they will not stop. They will come again stronger, hungrier, until there is nothing left but ash. He paused, letting the words sink in. But hear this. We will not stop either. On alien worlds, beings froze as his words carried into their homes. Some trembled, some wept. Some felt a spark of hope. Rourke continued, his tone dark but unyielding. You call us Deathworlders. You fear us because we come from a world of storms and monsters. You fear us because we are too stubborn to die. But today, you learned the truth. We are not just dangerous. We are loyal. We are relentless. And when the galaxy calls, we come. The comms carried his voice like thunder. We will fight, we will bleed, we will sacrifice as Captain Vargas and her crew did, so that the stars do not go dark. That is our promise. That is our curse. And that is our gift to you. The silence on the bridge was heavy. Officers bowed their heads. Some wiped tears from their eyes. But the message was not finished. Rourke leaned closer to the transmitter, his eyes like fire. So remember this. If the Hollow return, and they will, you will not face them alone. Call for the Deathworlders and we will rise. Call for us, and the fleet will thunder to life, and we will fight until the dark itself fears us. His final words cut across the galaxy, sharp and unbreakable, because we are Deathworlders, and when we fight, we do not stop. The comms went silent, but the words remained, carried in the hearts of every species that had heard them. On alien worlds, children whispered the promise. On military stations, officers replayed the message in grim silence. Across the galaxy, the legend of the Deathworlders grew. They were no longer just feared. They were remembered. They were respected. And they were needed. In the days that followed, the fleet drifted back toward human space. Broken ships were repaired, wounded soldiers laid to rest, names carved into memory. But something deeper had changed. The galaxy now looked at humans differently. The word Deathworlder was no longer just a warning. It was a shield, a hope, a final line against the dark. On the observation deck of Titan's Wrath, Rourke stood alone, staring at the stars. The wreckage of the hive still drifted, in the distance glowing faintly like dying embers. He thought of Vargas. He thought of every soldier lost. He thought of Earth, shining blue and fragile behind him. The galaxy would never stop being dangerous. The Hollow would never stop hunting. But neither would humanity stop fighting. That was their destiny. That was their curse. And in his heart, Rourke knew one thing with certainty. The Deathworlders had been called, and the Deathworlders had answered.